Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jean Fox, and I'm a Family Connections leader. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all to the Family Connections Alumni Institute's Module 5 Reboot on Validation Skills for March 30th, 2022. The National Education Alliance for Borderline Personality Disorder is a nonprofit organization that it provides education, raises public awareness and understanding, decreases stigma, promotes research, and enhances the quality of life of those affected by borderline personality disorder and related problems, including emotion dysregulation. NEABPD has the largest virtual resource library online with information relating to BPD. In conferences around the world, we bring together clinicians, researchers, people with lived experience, and family members. Our signature program is Family Connections, which all of you are quite familiar with. We are pleased to bring this webinar to you today to continue learning and practicing the skills that you were introduced to in the Family Connections course. Today's topic is a review of Module 5 and validation skills. This program is being recorded, and Zoom will send you an email with the recording in 24 to 72 hours. Your video has been disabled and all participants are muted. We ask that you please submit your questions through the Q&A rather than the chat. So all questions go through Q&A. The presenters and panelists will answer as many questions as time permits. Also, please keep your questions on today's topic, which is validation. This is not a forum for asking for advice for other personal situations that you might be experiencing. So your questions can be general or particular, but in relation to validation today. Thank you. Our presenters today are Doreen Dawson and Donna Donovan, who are two of our most experienced Family Connections leaders.
Hi, so my name is Doreen Dawson, and I am a mother of a child, but my child is an adult, and I've been leading Family Connections since 2013, and Donna was my co-leader for most of those 8 years. I think we did 16 courses together, so really happy to be here tonight.
I'm Donna Donovan. It's kind of funny. Doreen and I have been teaching together for 8 years, and Donna Donovan and Doreen Dawson. We felt that was, somewhat fate. And our daughters. I am a mother of a daughter who is 30 years old and has BPD, and our daughters were born 7 days apart too. So we have a lot in common, to say the least. But I'm glad to be here. Validation is so important, and I think this is great that we're doing a reboot because I need reboots on validation all the time, and helps to keep my skills fresh. So I'm really pleased to be here. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
That's great. So I just wanted to go through a real quick welcome. So welcome to our presentation. Donna and I hope that this review of Module 5 is helpful with your skills of validation and endearment. And I just want to say it's review because all of these Alumni Institute webinars, they're for Family Connections alumni only. So you've all had, whenever we do these reboots, whether it's about the whole module or about a skill, you've already learned it. So we're going to speak quickly. So we're not going to reteach this information because you've already heard it before. We're going to review it. We hope to give some few examples, answer some questions. So our goal is to help remind you about what you've already learned so that you can be more effective when you communicate with your person with BPD. Donna and I are from the Boston area, and we both speak quickly. Sometimes we drop our R's and etc. So, if when we're reviewing, that's a really good thing. We can speak fast. But if you certainly have any questions, like Jean already told you, please put them in the Q&A tool. Not in the chat. We have experienced leaders, and all of us are volunteer family members. We're not healthcare professionals. We're not mental health professionals. All of your leaders, all of us, we're family members. So we're the ones that you've already seen some of the panelists. They're going to be answering the questions. We'll answer some of the questions live at the end. We'll try to make them more general. but I've already told the people who are asking the questions, certainly if something comes up that everybody seems to be confused about, something we said, feel free to interrupt or to ask an important question. We want to acknowledge that, Donna and I are parents, but we want to acknowledge that there are a lot of you out there that are not from parents. You're from different relationships. Or even if you are parents, some of those have younger children, some of you have adult children, there's siblings, there's children of adults with BPD, there's spouses, romantic partners, ex-partners who still co-parent with someone with BPD, and other people that have taken our course over the years that are just, they love someone with BPD, their aunts, uncles, friends, etc. Anyone who is close and loves someone with BPD is able to take our course. So we're going to do our best to keep things generalized, but we do understand that the skills that we talk about with validation, and we'll end with Dear Man, they're used differently in different relationships. And also something that works best for one person may not work with another, no matter what the relationship is. So I just want to reiterate what Jean has asked, is that we keep your questions to the material we're presenting. It's validation and a little bit on Dear Man at the end. So we can't answer questions about treatment or therapists or the diagnosis, etc. So if we can keep your questions general versus telling your specific situation, that would be really, really helpful. And so what I'm going to do is go ahead and start sharing my screen, and we'll start our presentation. So let me just get this set up. Just takes me a minute, share my screen. Okay. Whoop, I don't know how that happened. Okay, so can you see the what
Yep.
right now? Okay, great. And so tonight we're going to be talking about is validation skills. So again, all of you have taken this. It's module 5. So in this module, we're given skills or strategies, and it's the cornerstone. Validation is the cornerstone of communication. So the more that people can engage in accurate expression and validation, the better they're going to feel. We can't, all of our Family Connections course, all of the classes, they're for us. So we can't control our person with BPD. So all we can control is our half of the situation. But certainly the more we engage in effective communication, the better the relationship's going to be. And then we're going to have to look for ways that we're going to be effective without sacrificing our self-respect. So at the end of module 5, I don't know if you remember, we get a little bit into setting limits, and we'll introduce the skill of Dear Man. And so, I just want to remind people, this is where you went. When you came to Family Connections, there was module 1. We introduced ourselves. We gave us a brief introduction into BPD. We talked about emotional dysregulation. I don't know if you all remember. If you have your information there, emotional dysregulation was in the middle, and all those little spikes coming off of the end. We educated you about emotional dysregulation in BPD, how our people have low self-esteem, they have problems in relationship, they want to numb and feel numb and escape from their feelings. They often don't think rationally when they're dysregulated, etc. And then we get into relationship mindfulness. We talked about mindfulness is really important about staying in the moment, on purpose, with intention, and losing judgment about what is going on about that person, about yourself. And then we jump into relationship mindfulness, where we take that skill of mindfulness and we focus it on the relationship. So we're in the here and now. We try to lose judgment by using observe and describe. So again, I'm just bringing you up to where we are now. We tried to make the family environment, we use some skills there again to try to create this validation and validating environment. So now that we're here, we're back into module 5, and we're in the validation skills. So what is validation? So validation is basically the cornerstone of building trust. It's how we connect with someone. It communicates to that person that you matter, and I'm trying to understand you, your wants, your feelings and actions. It's really easy to sit here and talk about it, but it's much harder to put in practice. When our person is dysregulated and they're not, communicating effectively, it's really hard to validate in those moments. And then also for ourselves, in module 1, one of our first assignments often is to take care of yourself, because it's also difficult to validate someone if we're feeling vulnerable. We're not sleeping, we're not eating, we're not taking care of ourselves. So validation is that you know, identify and then communicate your understanding of what the other person's saying or feeling in a very clear way, which is why we use this acronym. You want to communicate openly what you understand. You want to legitimize the facts of another person's responses. And legitimize doesn't mean that you agree or that you're saying what they're feeling is that you know you totally understand, but you're just trying to start to legitimize, saying like it makes sense, I can understand maybe from your point of view why you feel that way. And we want to empathize, and empathize, hopefully all of you saw in your family connections course. If you haven't, look up Brene Brown, empathy versus sympathy. So sympathy is kind of feeling sorry for someone, where empathy is you're really connecting, you're putting yourself in their place, you're understanding what they're going through from their point of view. And so we just want to, you know, acknowledge the situation and the other person's feelings. It doesn't always mean that we, you know, we agree with them. We're just trying to understand from their perspective. And Alan Frazzetti, you know, we want to respect their feelings, reactions, goals, emotions, even if they're different from ours. And so that's the really hard part in validation, is that when you don't agree with the way someone is understanding the situation, what their perspective on what just happened is, but we're just focusing on the feeling. And often, Alan Frazzetti, who's one of the authors of Family Connections, he used to say, remember the 4 F's, is forget the facts and focus on the feelings. Super, super hard to do. And so even in difficult situations or with problematic behaviors, there's something can be found. And a lot of people that, you know, Dawn and I have taught 16 classes. So yes, we've come across many, many people over the years. And so, you know, often we'll say like, well, they were sneaking out of the house. Like, how do you validate that? Well, let's ask some curious questions and find out why they were sneaking out. And maybe you're not agreeing with them sneaking out, or going over the budget, or posting something on social media or something. But maybe we can understand why they did it. And maybe when we understand why and their feelings behind that behavior that happened, we can validate that feeling. Wow, sounds like you were really missing your friends and that you were frustrated that, you know, your curfew was understand. I can understand why you'd want to see your friends, you know, and you want to validate a few times. We'll talk about that before we go into that, you know, maybe sneaking out wasn't the best idea, but again, we want to try to find something that can be valid. So validation is the communication of empathy. And so that's really difficult, you know, when we go ahead and you know, we think we're understanding, you know, maybe we're nodding our head or something, but if they don't feel like we're listening, then we're not communicating it enough. And so we want to go ahead and remember that accurate expression is really important. So maybe I say to my person, or you say to your person, wow, sounds like you're really angry, or sounds like you were really hurt. And by us communicating that, then they can reply like, no, I'm not hurt, I'm frustrated, or no, I'm not angry, I'm just sad. And so when we can go ahead and accurately express ourselves, then it helps them to go ahead and listen to us, and then again opens up this, you know, this communication. And so one of the parts about being able to validate is that we have to control our own emotions too. And so if you remember back in one of the previous modules that we go ahead is we want to identify our primary emotion. So if we start to feel escalated, like what's really bothering me about this right now? Why am I so angry? Well, maybe I feel disrespected. Maybe my own feelings are hurt. Or maybe I'm just tired and I just got home from work and now they're springing this conversation on me. And so whatever we can do to, you know, reduce our own emotional arousals, we're going to be much better at communicating this empathy if at all possible. And so what are the types of validation? And I know I'm going really quickly. Again, this is a review. But the types of validation, it doesn't always have to be words. It can be actions. It could be patting someone's hand and be like, you know, scrunching up your face or holding your chest, or you know, making a sigh or something that they can see that, you know, you're getting it. You can understand that they're having a tough time. But of course, words are hopefully what we're going to try to do as much as possible. You don't have to say you agree or you're right, but you can say, of course, you know, if you think that, if you can agree with them or tell them you're right, I'd be upset that my boss said that in front of the other employees. And, you know, you want to be able to communicate that. But if you don't agree with what they said, then you can say, yeah, I can see from your point of view that, you must be frustrated, or geez, if you thought that I was cheating, I can't imagine how hurt I would feel. I can understand why you're really angry. And so it's just communicating that. So if possible, it's with words, but it doesn't always have to be. If someone's looking exhausted and really run down, you might get them a cup of coffee or put a blanket over them or something. So it can be with actions also. And so Donna, this is
Yeah.
yours.
So why is validation important? And it is essential to maintain a relationship, and we show that we value it. Um, as Doreen mentioned, it's really the cornerstone of building trust and building a relationship. And so, as a first response to any personal disclosure, um, validation is the core of communication. It builds trust and slows reactivity. Oftentimes, validation, what I found it really can do is it stops a situation from escalating. And oftentimes, an escalation of a situation, those of us who, have a person in our life that has BPD, escalation can happen like that. It can be very, very fast. So if validation really helps us to kind of keep everything on an even keel. And that way you can actually have a conversation. I found when my daughter was very dysregulated, we were talking at each other. We weren't talking to each other. Validation kind of opens the door to let you talk to each other in a meaningful way. So it builds trust and slows reactivity. As I said, it reduces anger and judgments. Judgment's a big thing. Oftentimes our person with BPD has maybe said things, done things that it's very hard for us not to judge. But they feel that, they're emotionally sensitive. They feel that judgment from us. So a big part of validation is to be non-judgmental. It can be very hard, takes practice, but that's a really important aspect of validation. It enhances self-respect, both on both sides. Okay, your person can see that you're trying to have a legitimate and honest, a meaningful communication with them instead of a screaming match. And that shows that you're treating them with respect, and they in turn hopefully will do likewise. It's the key to getting through rough spots, and anyone with who knows a person with BPD knows that there could be a lot of very, very, very rough spots. Validation can help smooth those over, which can make a huge difference in what happens next in the relationship. It increases, positivity in the relationship, and it makes problem solving, closeness, and other support possible. If you're not having honest, legitimate communication, it's really hard to do anything in that situation. So it really kind of opens the door to have meaningful conversation. When I finally learned how to validate appropriately, it changed the whole dynamic of my relationship with my daughter back when she was dysregulated. So I can't stress enough how important it is. And it also takes practice, and we'll talk about that more as we go on. So next slide. Okay, so what are we going to validate? Feelings and emotions. I can see that you're upset. I can see that you're angry. We're validating, the obvious, right? The legitimacy of wanting something. I know you really wanted that money from me. I know you wanted to borrow that money, but I just can't afford it right now. But I understand why you wanted it. So even if you don't really understand why they wanted the money, and even if you don't agree with it, at least you're acknowledging they're wanting something. And then again, we're talking about being able to effectively communicate. So, so legitimacy of wanting something might not, you don't have to agree with it, but at least acknowledge that they want it and it's legitimate to them. Beliefs, opinions, thoughts are things more. So, I understand that that you really believe that this course of action is the right thing for you. I understand that's how you feel. You're not agreeing with it, doesn't mean you like it, but you are acknowledging it. True values, that's very important. You want to say, I know that that this is something that's really important to you because you want to finish your education, whatever the topic is. You're acknowledging their thoughts, their emotion, their true values. Also, you want to validate how difficult something is. Oftentimes people with BPD, a lot of things that might not be difficult for us are very difficult for them. So acknowledging that, I know this is really hard for you. I'm sorry this is so hard for you. Those types of things. Who doesn't want to be understood? And really what validation is, we're communicating understanding. And I think that's something we all want. When you're trying to communicate to someone, you want them to understand what you're trying to communicate. So validating helps them to believe that we understand what they're saying. You want to try to validate how hard a person is trying. Even if they're not being particularly successful with what they're trying, at least you're acknowledging that I can see how important this is to you and how hard you're trying to make this work. Things like that. Again, we're talking about understanding. We're trying to communicate that we understand how they feel. And that is really important because people with BPD being emotionally sensitive oftentimes are very misunderstood. So it is important that they feel understood. Things that a person does that are effective. I love the way you took care of your grandmother the other day. That was terrific how much you supported her. Things like that they need people with BPD oftentimes need a win too, need to feel like they're doing something right. Because oftentimes they feel like they don't do anything right. So anything that you can throw out there that shows that it needs to be true. Okay. You can't, and what Doreen will talk about, we don't want to validate something that is not valid, but there's always something you can find that a person does that you can at least acknowledge. And then efforts made. I know how hard you worked on trying to get that new job or that promotion. I can see that, you're really, really putting your best foot forward, things like that. So, okay, next slide. Okay.
I think we were just going to stop for a minute, and
Okay,
then
yep.
Dawn and I were just going to throw out some things that just some difficult situations, and we just want you to put in the chat. So I think if we can, I'm going to see if I can open up the chat for a minute, everyone. Okay. So what we want to do is I'm going to go ahead, both of us are going to be dysregulated for a minute and say some things, and let's see if you can put in the chat something that you can validate. So I guess I'll go for, we're literally doing this on the fly. So this wasn't scripted. We talked about it a little while ago. So, okay. So I come home, I'm the dysregulated person, and I come in and I say, I throw my purse down and I say, I hate my job. That's it. I'm quitting. My boss sucks. I can't do this anymore. Can anyone put in something in the chat that you could say that would be validating? Yep. You seem angry.
Sounds like that's wonderful. That's great.
Yep. Yep. Sounds like you're
that's wonderful.
Mhm.
Wonderful.
Perfect. Tell me more. That's a great one. If you don't know what to say, and I'm going to put in towards the end a reminder. Hopefully, you all got in your course that validation handout that included invalidating statements, validating statements. Invalidating statements are the ones you want to avoid, but validating statements and curious questions. Sound like you had a bad day. What do you want to do about these? These are great. That sucks. That's a good one too, because we have these wonderful statements that sound. Dawn, I'm taking it away from you and I were talking about it, but we were saying these things are a framework, and so you want to put it in your own language. And if someone says like, oh my God, my daughter would say, you sound like a robot. What are you trying to be, a therapist, etc. So, I had to, that's what I would start to say. I would start to say and said, oh, that must have been really hard for you. I could say, oh, that sucks. You're really struggling right now. That must be so frustrating. These are fantastic. I'm really proud of all of you.
Yeah, just to add to that a little bit, Doreen, I have my examples of validating statements. And when I first took the course, before I was leading, I had this piece of paper, and I had one in the top drawer of my desk at work, one on my kitchen counter, and one on my purse. And so my daughter would call and I would say, oh, I can see how hard you are working. And I was literally reading them, and she would just be like, yeah, right. Okay, bye, click. And so one of the things that, we're going to talk about is you need to make it sound like you. Okay. And that can take that's the part I think that takes practice, is because I was just I was not used to being a validating person, if I'm being honest. And And so I was reading them right off of here, and it didn't sound like me, and it made no difference. She wasn't buying it. So I really had to practice and put it into language that she and I understood, together. And that's really important. So it's okay to practice on people at work. That's what I ended up doing, and got great results too, by the way. Validation works on everybody. So I would practice at work. Somebody would come in my office and complain about something, and instead of saying, "Oh, for crying out loud," again, I would say, "Oh, that must have been really hard. How did that make you feel?" And the differences was like, I felt like I had a magic wand. So when you get better at it, as we get good at it, and probably a lot of you are very good at it already, it took me a long time to get good at it. So if
often
it works too, the first couple, sorry, Doreen, it doesn't, and if you swing and you miss, that's okay. Just keep trying. And again, practice. So
Someone put in the chat, I've never heard it before, ABC, which stands for like awesome, oh, bummer, or oh, that sounds crappy or cool. That was pretty
Oh, that's
fun.
good.
And I think that someone had mentioned, Joe, one of our very experienced leaders, often we want to avoid saying, I know. Oh, I know you don't. Often when we say, I know, some people with BPD can handle it. My daughter's hates it. You don't know how I feel. Like, so often I've changed, like, I'm wondering, or I can imagine, or something like that. It works really better. So, okay. So did you want to throw one more thing out, Donna? Otherwise we can go back.
Sure. Yeah. So, my scenario, I'm gonna be my daughter. Mom, I have asked you 15 times to loan me this money. Okay. I need it. And I just don't know why I have to keep asking you the same thing over and over and over again. It's like if it was, her sister, if it was for Sam, the money would be right there on the table right away. But because it's me, you're just not going to do it. That's like probably an exact conversation. But anyway.
So again, this is throwing it out to you. Can anyone find something valid in that conversation? Sucks when you don't have the money you want. Perfect. Yep.
Very good. Yep.
Anybody else? Oh, this is a hard one, I can tell, huh? Sounds like you're really worried about your finances.
Excellent.
Perfect.
Really
So again, you're not agreeing that you want to give the money. So this is asking for money is hard. Seems like this is important to you. These are perfect. Hopefully you're all reading these chats. So this is great. So you're focusing on the feeling, not necessarily on what they're asking for, especially when you don't agree necessarily what they're doing.
I love the frustrating things. You sound frustrated. This is how. That's excellent because I wasn't going to give her. I didn't give her the money, by the way, but because she was always asking for money, but it was frustrating for her because she was very, very frustrated, and that's something that you can say, God, you must be so frustrated. It sucks when you don't have enough money to do whatever, right? So that's awesome.
And I like this one. I hear that you're feeling unfairly treated because they brought up about the sibling, et cetera. So,
right.
So these are good. Okay. So just so we can stay on time, we just wanted to do that a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and back. Let me just make sure this is ready. And then Donna, you have one more slide, I think.
Yep. Are you going to put, there we go. Okay, great. Okay. And then levels of validation. So you want to actively listen. So pay attention. So don't be emptying the dishwasher, don't be writing something down. You really want to sit there, eye contact, and let them know that you're hearing what they're saying. Reflect descriptively and not judgmentally. So I heard what you just said, that you need money. I understand that's very frustrating, etc. So you're letting them know that they're heard. Acknowledge their experience, thoughts. Some of the comments you guys put up there were terrific. It's very, very, it's hard when you don't have enough money to buy the things you want. Show tolerance. This is so, hard that you want this money, and I understand, but man, and I wish I could do it right now, but I can't. But at least I'm acknowledging and and letting her know that she's heard. Be mindful of the relationship. Sometimes people, when our person is very dysregulated, they can wear you out, and sometimes you get frustrated, and I know that before I learned these skills, I would like to take back about 150 things that I said. And because I wasn't being mindful of the relationship, she was frustrated. I was frustrated. I didn't understand at the time what I was dealing with. Now that I do, the relationship is first and foremost. And I want to make sure that I always have that relationship with her. So, keep that in the front of your mind that I don't want to mess up this relationship. I want the relationship to become closer. Practice willingness and genuineness. Listen, let me think about this money, and let me see what I can do. Let me talk to dad. Maybe there's something I'm not sure. Let me, but at least I'm showing that I'm going to think about it and I'm not just flat out saying no. And then self-disclose your own vulnerability. This was very important in my relationship. Sometimes people with BPD feel like they're the only people that have problems, and they feel sometimes that nobody else, has the type of issues that they have. And in some ways that's true, but in other ways, like my daughter, and this came out in a therapy session, felt that I didn't have a problem in the world. So what I started doing is telling what I call dumb Donna stories, because I do a lot of dumb stuff, and but she didn't see that. She could only see what she could see at the time. So I would say, and I actually did this. Hey, I went to work today with 2 different shoes on, and I actually did do that. And the heel heights weren't even the same, and she loved it, because it showed her that I screw up stuff too, And so whenever I did something, silly, stupid, whatever, I would share that with her. Sometimes I even made some stuff up just to make her feel, that she wasn't the only one. And that was, showing that I'm vulnerable, that I have problems too. And I felt that aspect of the relationship really helped to improve, that my doing that helped to really improve the strength and the closeness of the relationship.
And I just want to add there, so when, Donna mentioned that, our daughters' names are similar, there's a lot of the age was similar. Our daughters were very, very different. And this is one of those situations where Donna would disclose her vulnerability, it made her daughter feel better. If I brought up any stories about myself, my daughter would get upset and she would say, stop making this about you. Why do you always have to bring up your stories, etc.? So I could not do that. And this is a trial and error. You just have to figure out what works for you and for your person. So like Donna and many other people in our classes have said the same thing. It really helps when they share those stories, and then other people are like me. So family connections is a framework. Not everything's going to work for everybody. We're just giving you some ideas, and you'll have to figure out what's best for your person. So I'm going to skip the slide, but it is in your material, again, just for time, and this is a review, but it's kind of going over what we've already said. This is the why and the how, and of course, me too, I'm here, and ways to do it, but since it's already there and we've already learned it, I'm going to go ahead and skip that for time. So what are the ways of invalidating? So now we're going to just kind of point out some of the things that happens in validation. And so in your module, it's really funny. We often seriously joke and jokingly seriously say that, these are the 101 or 202 ways to, corrode your relationship and help the other person feel miserable. Invalidation just stinks. And whatever we can do to avoid it, we want to. And so, it's really easy to invalidate in person. Some of these things are really negative, and I'll go through them in just a minute. But sometimes we can invalidate someone even with the best of intentions. By saying something, I know my husband, my daughter came home one time when she finally started working professionally, and she had her first staff meeting, and she was saying, how difficult it was to sit in this room full of people and try to manage what was going on and feeling the energy of everyone around her. And my husband trying to make her feel better, like, oh, staff meetings, you'll get used to it, and it's, I had 3 today or something. And all that did was make her feel, it was minimizing her feelings. And so what happens is that he was trying to be helpful. So even sometimes when we're helpful, when our people who have suicidal feelings or self-harm or a lot of despair, often we say, oh, please, how can you feel that way? You have so much going for you and everybody loves you. That's actually invalidating. You're thinking you're helping that person, but it's telling them that they shouldn't feel the way that they do. Instead of a validating thing would be to say, I can't imagine feeling like that. That must be so hard to have such despair and lack of hope. I can't imagine that. So I saw a few minutes ago that there were some hands raised, but I just want to reinforce that if you cannot raise your hand, but just ask in the Q&A, then people will go ahead and help. So what are the ways of invalidating? It's making threats or being aggressive. If you don't do this, I'm going to do this. Being physically aggressive, pushing, slamming doors, et cetera, et cetera. That's a lot of ways that someone can feel invalidated, that you're angry for them for feeling the way that they feel. Ignoring or pretending not to pay attention. If your person is in the corner crying or laying in bed all day and you just ignore that and never go in and check or never say like, listen, I don't know what's going on, but just know that I'm here for you, is a much easier thing to say than just ignoring it and pretending that it's not happening. Minimizing feelings, I gave that example about my husband, but it could be stop being so dramatic. You always make such a big deal out of everything. Being critical or judgmental. Should and just, only, all of those are judgmental words. If you would only do this, you would feel better. Or why don't you? Or you really should go ahead and go to work today. I don't, stop being so dramatic. Anything that you can imagine being judgmental. Let the miscommunication go unrepaired. Everybody makes mistakes. We all are doing the best that we can. That was in, I think, Module 1 or something. Everyone's doing their best. And so what happens is if you go ahead and have a miscommunication, often I'll go back and I ended up role modeling this repair. I would go in and say, listen, I don't think I handled that well. I'm tired, I'm hungry, I just got home from work, I wasn't paying attention, I wasn't being mindful. Can we have a do-over? Or just know that I wish I had handled that differently. So anything that you can do to repair or let that miscommunication, be understood, it's important. And then I probably did that for like 3 years. And then finally one day my daughter came and she had gotten upset. And about an hour later, she came back and said, I don't think I handled that well. And I was so happy that that hard work had paid off. Being willful or focusing on what's right. We have a saying in Family Connections that, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? So often our people with BPD could pass a lie detector test that things happened the way that they say that it happened. It's because they remember things with their emotion. Often, it's not a medical fact or anything, but most of the time. So it's often, if you want to sit there and try to dispute the way that they remember things or that didn't happen, again, remember to focus on the feelings, forget the facts, and focus on the feelings. Insisting that your solution to the problem, certainly with more experience and without dysregulation or the lack of skills to deal with life, our problem, our solution may be more effective or may take less time or less effort. But if we push those solutions, then they're not invested in it. So we want to try to guide and support and talk it through with someone versus insisting. We want to, not make unmindful situations. If you remember that other skill earlier in the modules is assume the benign. If you're going to assume anything, we want to go ahead and focus on this moment, not the 100 other times that this argument happened, or not our anxiety going into the future. We want to be mindful and try to make, not making unmindful assumptions would be ways of invalidating. Up in the ante, well, if you're going to do that, if you're going to spend that, if you're going to go buy that, I'm going to go buy this, etc. Being hostile, raising our voice, anything that you can do. Back to mindfulness. A lot of leaders out there use mindfulness exercises, going in and deep breathing, going into the bathroom and splashing some water on your face. Anything that you can do to decrease your own feelings of anger and hostility is super important. And engaging in controlling behavior, taking, if possible, not taking away cell phones and things like that. I mean, certainly those safety things are an issue, but we don't want to make our people feel that we're controlling them. We want to show that we're supporting them, and certainly not validating enough. We're going to talk, I think, in a few minutes, and maybe I'll just say it now, like you want to go ahead and have at least 3 validating statements. I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's been scientifically proven that we want to make at least 3. So when that person comes home from work, I hate my job, etc., you don't want to say, well, it sounds like you're really upset, but you can't quit your job. We're not going to be able to afford rent. We want to say 3 validating statements. And often we don't want to go into problem solving. Validation is not a problem solving skill. It's a way to communicate and connect with someone so that we can bring the temperature down. I can't stress that enough. And so what happens is, we want to go ahead and bring the temperature down. Sounds like you had a really rough day. Oh, I know you were hoping to have a good day. I know you're really struggling with your boss right now. And that's it. That's all validation is. It's not going into. So you can never validate enough. Want to make at least 3 validation statements. And so validation tips is, take the other person's perspective. Some of this we've already been through. Again, I know I'm talking really quickly. Remember the foundation. This is your family member. This is someone, hopefully all of, it's like a requirement now to take this course, that you want to improve the relationship. Family connections is not about processing what's already happened, etc. It's like these are skills to move forward with. So remember that the foundation, this is your family member. This is someone hopefully that you love and you care about. Maybe if you don't feel love, maybe you're a co-parent who is not in a relationship anymore and you don't feel the love. Some parents don't even feel the love for their person, but hopefully you want to improve the relationship, or at least the communication. So remembering that this is someone you want to improve that relationship with. So empathy is the understanding and the validating. So, you want both. It's trying to understand and then expressing. And the reality acceptance, again, another skill that brought us here to now, is the reality acceptance and radical acceptance. Forgetting what should be, or what you wish it was, or what you were hoping for. It's a lot of grief when, a lot of us have a lot of grieving to go through to be able to get to a space where you can be validating. But acceptance really goes a long way. And then we want to make effective assumptions. Again, I just mentioned this, which is why I'm already going through this quickly, but we want to assume the benign, and that will really help promote this effective behavior. And then I already said it before, I knew it was coming up. You want to make at least 3 validating statements in a row to stop that escalation. Really challenging to do. And if you can't find 3 things, again, you can nod, you can hold, what can I do? Is there anything that I can help that will, improve the situation? So again, they're walking through the door, they're angry. Can I get you, a cup of coffee? Or why don't I make dinner tonight? Anything that you can do to support them in those situations. So again, I'm just thinking, and, with all those, all of you out there that are really struggling with your person, these are really hard to do. And I understand that. And especially if you're in a long-term relationship, you've had years of difficult stuff. We don't want you to be a doormat. It's just we're talking about validation in this module right now. And so I think this is my last one. Is that right? 13.
Yep.
Yeah. So validation, I just want to reemphasize that it is not agreeing with someone. You don't have to agree to try to find the feelings. It's not a problem-solving technique. This is just a way to connect with this person and try to bring the temperature down when someone is escalated. It's not placation. It's not like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I get it, because they're going to see through that. People with emotional dysregulation, they are very sensitive. They often will see through that you're faking it. And sometimes you do have to fake it a little bit until you get good at it, but it's not placation. It's really trying to understand. And then we're going to get into, you need to validate yourself too. It's really hard to be in a relationship with someone with BPD, whether you're active in it, if you're an ex-spouse and you're co-parenting. Siblings and adult children have a really difficult time. They were born into this situation. This is not something that they chose. And so you have every right to grieve a little bit and to feel sad and, disrespected. You want to go ahead and find those things too. I'm going to skip this one. This is the validation matrix, but it's in your material. It's basically, you want to validate what's valid. You don't want to, validate anything that is wrong. If they say that they hate you, or you hate them, you don't want to validate that. You want to you don't want to invalidate. This is a smiley. This is pretty self-explanatory. You don't want to invalidate anything that's valid. And then
Actually, Doreen, can I pop in here?
Sure.
Somebody did ask if you could give examples of each one of these. I don't know if you want to do that now or if you want to do it during the Q&A, but I just thought I'd throw that out there.
I'll do it really quick. So you validating the valid. So if they come home and they say, I hate my job. So yeah, that's something you can validate. I know you hate your job. Yeah, I know you're really struggling, with this situation. If they say you don't want to validate the invalid, if they say, I know you're so disappointed in me. I'm your worst child, or you wish you had never married me. So if that's not true, if it is true and you're trying to say no, it's not, they may say through this, but let's say it's not true. You don't hate them, you're not disappointed. Then you don't want to say, yeah, of course. You want to go ahead and try to invalidate that invalid. With starting with validation, and I know this is really confusing, but you want to say, that must be so hard to think that I don't love you. That must be so hard that you think I regret it. I can't imagine feeling like that you think that I regret marrying you. So you want to go ahead, you want to invalidate what's invalid. But we don't want to invalidate that something was valid. So say they come home and they're saying, I hate my job. No, you don't. That would be invalidating something that's valid. No, you don't. You just had a bad day. You don't really feel that way. Yeah, I do, right at this moment. So hopefully that, so you want to validate what's valid. You don't want to invalidate anything that's valid. That's the way that they feel. You don't want to tell them, that's why the bad smiley face is there or the frowny face. You want to, you don't want to validate something that's not true. You hate me, you're disappointed. You wish, I know you love them more. I know you're having feelings for your coworker. Anything they're saying that's invalid, you don't want to agree. And then you want to definitely, this is proceed with caution. So if they are saying something that's not true, you want to validate their feelings first before you invalidate that invalid thing. I've had really hard time with this. So any of you that are confusing out there, it's really hard. But this is why Nancy and I have talked with Alan. Nancy is another a staff person also, in addition to being a volunteer leader. So Alan has said that, you want to validate their feelings first before you tell them that what they're saying is not true in your heart. So hopefully that helps. So this is back to Donna.
Okay. So what is self-invalidation? It's very difficult sometimes to be in a relationship with a person that has BPD. We get frustrated, we get beaten up a little bit, emotionally beaten up. And so it's important that that you maintain your own sense of self, and that we don't invalidate ourselves. And I think anybody who's has a relationship with somebody with BPD probably has done a little bit of this, whether they want to admit it or not. So what is self-invalidation? It's not knowing what we're feeling or getting stuck in a secondary emotion. Very often anger is a secondary emotion. So if you get stuck in anger, nothing really good comes out of that, but it's important to sit back and say, okay, so what am I really feeling? I'm angry because I'm upset. Well, what is the primary emotion? Is it upset? Am I frightened? Am I concerned? What exactly is the primary emotion? And then the secondary emotion is usually anger, or I don't know. Give me another example, Doreen. What's another secondary? I think
jealousy. Jealousy is often based in fear.
Yeah. Right. So okay, so that's it. So then ignoring what we're feeling even when we know it. So if we know that we are feeling, let's say, disrespected, I'm just going to ignore that because I don't want to make the relationship worse. Not saying that you need to escalate the argument with your person, but we need to acknowledge that I'm feeling disrespected, and I have felt disrespected by my person in the past, and I think I did some ignoring of it just because I was so afraid of losing her. but it's, even if you just acknowledge it to yourself, you need to not ignore what you feel and feel what you feel. And then the next thing is self-invalidation is discounting what we're feeling. Oh, it doesn't really matter. Well, it does. If you're feeling disrespected or used, or you feel like you're being treated like a doormat, that does matter. It matters. It doesn't mean you're going to start an argument with your person over it. It just means that you need to acknowledge it and accept that this is, because if not, then you're disrespecting yourself in a way, and it's just really going to make us feel worse. And a big part of the Family Connections class, if you all remember, is that it is for us. It's about, this is a very, very difficult disease to have someone in your life that has this. And it's very easy to get depressed, to get down, to feel disrespected. And it's important that we understand how we're feeling, because if you don't understand it, or if you discount it, then that's just going to build inside you, and that's going to cause additional resentment. Allowing someone to treat us disrespectfully, even when okay, yeah, she doesn't mean it, or he doesn't mean it, or whatever the situation is, you have to acknowledge that if you're being treated disrespectfully, that doesn't feel good, and that's invalidating to us. And then not observing your limits. If you said, okay, I'm not giving you, I'll keep using the money example, I'm not giving you any more money, and then you turn around and give them the money, you're not going to feel good about yourself. And a lot of times you're also not really helping your person either. So self-invalidation is very easy. It's kind of an easy thing to fall into as someone who is in a relationship with somebody with BPD, but you need to really be mindful and aware of it so that so it doesn't make it worse. Because I think that once you get into resentment and things like that, it's only going to make the relationship worse, not better. Okay, so next slide. So the consequences, as I just mentioned, it's de-skilling, it's reducing our ability to cope. It reduces our mastery in relating to the other person. If I'm feeling disrespected and angry, I'm not going to be able to do a great job validating. And validation, as again, it's the cornerstone. It's building trust. It's keeping the relationship on track. If I'm not feeling good about the way I'm being treated, if I'm getting kind of sucked into that, so again, the self-invalidation, it's very important that we don't get stuck in that. It can promote depression, guilt, shame, and burden. And I think anybody who's been with in a relationship with somebody who is very dysregulated, you've probably had a little bit of all of that. It's a very, very difficult disease to have a loved one and be in a relationship with a loved one who has it. So it's important that we take care of ourselves. And it decreases our sense of well-being, including our physical health. Not sleeping, not eating enough. When my daughter was very dysregulated, I lost about 30 pounds in about 10 weeks, just because I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't taking care of myself. That doesn't put me in a position to help my loved one when I do that. So again, that's one of the consequences of not acknowledging self-invalidation, and it increases our emotional vulnerability. So it just puts us in a place where we're not going to be able to do a great job validating our loved ones, because we're not going to be ourselves mentally in a good spot. So, okay, next slide, okay. So self-validation skills: use mindfulness, be aware of your own feelings, acknowledge and label emotions. If you have a difficult conversation with your person, I used to like to play them back in my head and just say, okay, so what did I say? What did she say? And what am I really feeling? And that way I can I know where I am. Instead of just being caught up in the emotion, I can have kind of a valid understanding of what happened, what I'm feeling, and maybe why. Validate yourself. You know what? Maybe I didn't handle that conversation as well as I wanted to, but I tried. I'm going to do a better job next time. Right? Don't beat yourselves up. Use radical acceptance of your own feelings. If you feel what you feel. If sometimes you're very resentful of your person with BPD, that's okay. radically accept that, it doesn't mean that it will last forever. It just means that you need to acknowledge what you're feeling. Because if you don't acknowledge it, then you can't really figure out a way to cope with it, right? Identify what you self-invalidate. So we all get caught up in things where we're not validating ourselves. So identify when you're doing that to yourself, and then try to make yourself not do that. Reframe your perspective. Is the guilt unjustified? I mean, oftentimes parents in particular have a lot of guilt, feel like that I should have been able to do something that wouldn't put my child in this place. That's not really a valid reason to feel guilty. It just isn't. So support primary emotions and let go of secondary emotions, meaning a lot of times anger, jealousy, etc. Remove the word should. I should have said this. I should have done that. Nothing good comes from the shoulding. So it's really, it's not helpful to beat yourself up about what you coulda, shoulda, woulda done. So don't discount feelings when others contradict you. So if you know that you're feeling a certain way and someone says, that's not what's really going on, it's this. Don't let other people tell you what you feel, okay? And then encourage and accept validation from others, very important. When somebody says, hey, Doreen, you're doing the best you can. I think you really handled that well. Thank you, because that's helpful when people validate you. Even if it doesn't always work out, at least you're trying, and it's nice to have someone acknowledge that. And then next slide, Doreen, Mike.
Yep, you just mentioned something, Donna, that we often talked about in class, is that it's always helpful to me, for both when I'm validating my person and also when I'm validating myself. Like, what would you say to a polite coworker? Or, maybe you may be a little more truthful with a good friend or a family member, but a polite coworker, like, would you tell them, like, suck it up, come on, don't feel that way, or whatever? Or would you say, stop beating yourself up, you did the best you could in that moment, etc. So you want to treat yourself, like, what would you say to those people? Versus and the same thing with our people too, that if they come home and they say, oh, I was blackout drunk yesterday, I'm so hungover today at work, again, a polite coworker, often you're not going to say, well, if you didn't get drunk you wouldn't feel like that. You'd often say, oh yeah, hangovers are tough or something. So again, I just reminded me when you just
Great
said
point.
that.
Yeah, great point. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Essence of self-validation. Let go of judgments of yourself. Notice shame. Let it go and look for the primary emotion. Shame is a secondary emotion. Describe situations, acknowledge wants and preferences. Stay with, allow, appreciate, validate your primary emotions. Again, this is a difficult disease for the people who have it. It's also difficult to be close to someone who has it. So acknowledge that. It's if you don't, it's going to impact you, and then and therefore put us in a position where we're not in a good place to help our loved one. And practice being who you are. Notice and describe what you're doing, what you're saying, what you're feeling. And when in doubt, imagine someone you care about and respect. How would they respond? Emulate that. I have a sister-in-law who was born validating. She is a natural born validator. And I often think about what she would say in a situation like that. And I've never heard her say a mean word about anybody. So oftentimes I think, okay, what would Vicky say? And how would Vicky respond to that? And if you know someone like that, and probably everybody knows somebody like that, emulate them, because that's how we learn. Again, the practicing validation, I found to be very, very, very helpful. So, and I think you're here, Doreen.
Unmute myself, sorry. And so, trailing on from in self-invalidation is observing limits. And so what we want to do is that, having a relative with BPD can push you to sometimes do things that, accept things or do things that you might not normally do. And it's really hard. So to validate ourselves, and to take care of ourselves. Again, family connections is about us. It's not about our family member. It's about what we can do, what things that we can change, what can we do to support ourselves and be in a place where we can go ahead and validate and be supportive of our people. So what's observing limits? We use the term limits in family connections versus boundaries. And the reason for that, and we've gotten some pushback on that, well, like, what's the difference? Well, boundaries over the years really sounds like, if you just think, it's a property boundary, that is yours, this is mine. It's kind of a hard, it's often associated with having a hard line. And what we feel that in is limits is that, it can be a little more flexible, so boundaries often associated with some strong emotions. So in family connections, we say it's a limit. It's also about saying what's a limit for you. It's what's okay and what's not okay for you. And so we can, again, tell someone else not to do something. You can't drink, you can't smoke pot, you can't do this. If they're an adult, a child, it's a little bit different. Again, safety is always going to be first. But in limits, we feel like the limits are for us, and we feel that they can be flexible and fluid, and that your limits may change, and also your limits may be different from someone else's. So we feel like they're changeable depending on the circumstances. When they can sometimes be extended or relaxed based on what our needs are. So if one of your limits is that you can't, that I need my sleep, and this is what we're going to get into, some examples, but I'll go ahead and throw one out now. Like if my limit is that I really can't function without 8 hours of sleep. So that's not me. If anyone knows me, I'm emailing at 2 o'clock in the morning, but I'm just using it as an example that if I say I need 8 hours of sleep, so it's really important for me that no one text or email me in the middle of the night unless it's an emergency. That may be you're saying that that's my limit versus saying you can't text me, and that you're just saying that no one can do it. Now that can be flexible. So say it's not an emergency, but your person's really struggling, and they really just maybe they're not suicidal or it's not an emergency situation, but they can really really use supportive ear at that time. You may go ahead and go, you know what, they haven't done this in a while, and that can go ahead and that's why we use the term limit. It's on us, but they're flexible. And so we want to go ahead. The reason we use limits is that we want to self-validate. We want to take care of ourselves. It's important to our own well-being. And again, everybody's limits can be different. I drive my daughter to work because I want her to get to work. It's providing her income, self-esteem, social outlet, etc. And when she was taking the bus, it was really difficult for her. She would arrive at work dysregulated because by the time she got to work on the bus was full, people were smelly, etc., etc. So I don't mind doing that. But someone else's limit is like, no way, I'm not getting up an extra 15 minutes in the morning to do that. So everyone's limits can be different. So I just wanted to point that out. What we want to go ahead is that, we want to strive for balance with our needs and our loved ones. We don't want to go ahead and feel violated. Donna brought up some great points about, we don't want to be burnt out. We don't want to feel disrespected, etc. So, we want to go ahead and find that fine line between enabling and being supportive. And I'm guilty of it. I cross between it all the time. It's really hard to find that line. And if what it comes down to is if you are feeling overwhelmed, disrespected, exhausted, tired, feeling being used, etc. Those feelings is where you want to go ahead and think like, I need to change something. I need to observe these limits. And so it takes a lot of work. You have to do a lot of self-reflection and trying to find out, what it is that's bothering you, going back to your primary emotion versus just feeling angry and resentful. Like, what's the bottom line here? I feel tired. I feel like I'm being taken advantage of. I feel disrespected. I feel hurt, or whatever it is. And so sometimes you just have to go ahead and do some self-reflection before you ever go ahead and set these limits up. So every situation is different. We have to use our wise mind, and I'm going to be going into that in just a minute. If I remind you of what wise mind is, it's that happy place between emotion and logic. And so, but using our wise mind helps us to find where these limits are. And it's not, again, just want to reinforce, it's not about setting boundaries or ultimatums or making a threat. It's really trying to find something that it's about ourselves. So these are some examples of dysregulated behaviors where you may want to observe some limits. Disordered eating or diet. It could be, not just an anorexia situation, could be overeating. I had to stop. My limit was that I stopped buying junk food. I'm not going to support that, and so now it doesn't mean my person could go out and do those things on their own, but I'm going to head and set my limit that, I don't feel comfortable buying these foods anymore, so I'm just going to stop. Crime and antisocial behavior, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Breaking the law, drinking and driving, smoking pot if marijuana is not legal in your state, etc. Demanding money. Isolation's a hard one. So a lot of our people out there, our people with BPD out there, there's often the stereotypical blowing up, etc. But there's many people that are just really isolated. They stay in all the time. There's no activity. So maybe a limit is that, if I'm having a hard time supporting you being in the basement all day. My limit is that you may want to go, I need you out of the house for 3 hours a day. I need the house to myself. So that's your limit. You're not saying you have to do this, but I need the house to myself, for 3 hours a day or so. Substance misuse, again, something that, the limit, if you're going to head and going to be using drugs, then I cannot tolerate that. I don't want this illegal activity. I don't want to provide an environment where it's okay to do that. Self-harm is a tough one. There's a whole other videos and things out there about what self-harm is. So we can't necessarily tell someone they can't self-harm, but I'm not going to buy you razor blades anymore. I'm not going to do anything that you may want that you feel is contributing to this dysregulated behavior. Then you can set just use the word boundary, a limit on that. Not involved in education and work. So you may say, well, I'm only going to support half of your rent, or you can live in this house as long as, you're going ahead, that nobody in this house can live here without making some contribution. That would be the limit versus saying you have to do this. Sexual promiscuity. I've had people over the year in our class where siblings, adult children, even parents or something with BPD who were living with their child, were bringing home people that, that they didn't know, etc., and they felt unsafe in their home. So again, the limits on them. I don't want anybody in this house that we don't know, we haven't gotten to know outside of the house. And violence is pretty self-explanatory. Throwing things, hurting themselves, hurting others, etc., is something that you want to go ahead and set a limit on. And so observing our limits rather than limit setting, it's flexible depending on the situation. This is just a quick review. Why? It helps reduce our burnout. It preserves the relationship. It preserves your sense of self, your self-respect, that you can come away from this relationship feeling good, this interaction. And how? And this is how you're going to try to find it. You want to identify what you're willing to accept, what goes beyond your limit and sense of self-respect, and when it's okay to say no. And I know I'm rushing a little bit because we want to allow a little time for questions at the end. And I think this is you, Donna.
Yeah. Okay, so how do we identify our limits? Be a curious, emotional scientist, not a judge. So, what that means is really, okay, what am I really feeling? What's really bothering me? And then the next thing, what's keeping me up at night? Okay, so whatever's keeping you up at night is probably something we should set a limit on, right? When triggered, observe the action and the action urge in yourself. So when you get upset about something, what upset you and why? And so we're sort of saying, it's almost like you want to do a recap. When something, you want to sit back and say, okay, so I got very upset about something that, my person said. What was it that upset me? And because if we don't understand what's really the heart of the matter, so to speak, and if we don't have that self-awareness, it's really hard to know what we should set limits on. So what triggered it? Was it a primary emotion or a secondary emotion? Define what you don't like about the behavior. What is it that is bothering me and why? Decide if this is something you can tolerate. Sometimes there are things that you thought you wouldn't tolerate that you do, Other people say, nope, this is something I'm not doing, and that's the end of that. So it's an individual thing. Again, it's self-awareness, and you have to decide what your limits are, and then set them, and then honor them. Because again, we talk about self-invalidation. If you don't, you're going to, that causes, depression. You're going to feel disrespected, angry, etc. And then finally, decide if this is something you need to communicate based on how much you value the relationship. So, you know, I'm not an advocate. I mean, some people do this, some people don't, saying, okay, these are my limits, and sitting down with my person. But there are other ways you can communicate them without, sitting down and making a laundry list. And say, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm not going to do. Now, if that's something that you feel is appropriate with your person, everybody's different. As Doreen said, there's differences between, our two daughters and how we can communicate with them. If that's something that you can do, do it. If I did that with my daughter when she was dysregulated, all hell would have broken loose. So you have to figure what's going to work, know your person, know yourself, and what's going to work for you. Okay. And then finally, observing limits. Next slide there, Doreen. Thank you. Oh, okay. What if they don't respond well, don't modify the behavior, and become more dysregulated? This is going to happen. Okay. So again, validate, validate, validate. And, Doreen said 3 good validations in a row usually does the trick. I have found that personally to be 100% accurate. 3 good validations that sound like you, that don't sound, like you're reading them off of a sheet of paper, will make a huge difference. And I think there's even studies, Doreen, right, that show that 3 validating statements can de-escalate somebody who's getting upset. So expect that they're going to respond a certain way, and then just be ready for it with your validations. And then tips to next slide, Doreen. Thanks.
Yeah, I just noticed, I've been trying to stay away from the chat, et cetera, but I want to reemphasize, someone said when they don't modify their behavior, maybe you've set a limit or something. And when we say validate, 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 it's like, I know this is really hard. Is there something that's stopping you, from following through? I know you agreed
Right.
to do this. So anything you can do to validate, to try to get, and back. And again, that's going to be in the next module, which will be next month, actually next week. We'll be talking about collaborative problem solving. So I just want to reemphasize that.
All right.
Thanks.
And then tips to sticking with your limit. Be a broken record. Repeat your limit. Honey, I know you want this money. I wish I could afford it. I'm so sorry that I can't, but I just don't have the money right now. Express that your limit is about you and your needs, not the behaviors of the person. I wish I had the money to give you. I just don't right now, and I feel terrible about that. Soothe disappointed reactions to the limit. Okay, I know you're disappointed that I can't, help you out right now with this rent money, but unfortunately, as I told you, I just don't have it right now. Validate how difficult it is to have this shift, if you will, in the relationship and them not getting what they want. Sometimes in BPD relationships, we've given in a little too much sometimes. And then when you start to set limits, it's very hard. So that's a shift in that now you're saying no, and maybe we were saying yes before. So, this is really hard. I know that you wanted this money. I understand how hard this is for you. And be honest that the limit is a core value for you. I just feel strongly that I can't give you more than what I can afford, honey. I'm so sorry. And then don't give in. It's not helpful in the long run, unless something, crazy happens and there's a change of circumstances. But it's important that if you go to, you stick to your limit, you've set it, you've stated why. Unless there is something extreme that happens, you should do your very best to stick to it. So that. And finally, observing limits is for you. It's not the other person's job to take you into considerations. It's your job to take you into consideration. And to this, I say, hell yes, because that is, especially with somebody with BPD, they're not, in a place where they can consider what you're feeling, what your needs are, your situation. That's your job to do that. to know yourself, know your limits, and don't expect your person with BPD to do this for you, because they're just not in a place where they can, unfortunately, right now. But again, it's your job to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And if we don't take care of ourselves, we're really not going to be effective in working on a relationship with our person with BPD. So I think this is you, Doreen.
Yeah. So I wanted to just, I mentioned it a minute ago about wise mind. And again, this was something that was mentioned in an earlier. This is again where we're all of these skills. This is why we present family connections in the way it's a skill building. So wise mind was something that I believe happened before, but if not, just reinforce it here, is that wise mind is this wonderful Venn diagram. I love this diagram because it's this happy place right in the middle where we use our wise mind. If we let our emotions get out of control, and this is if hopefully our people are learning this if they're in therapy too. I really want this puppy. Oh, it's so cute and he's so nice and it's going to bring me such joy and I'll have something to love. And, the rational mind is, oh, it costs money to go ahead and vet bills and et cetera, et cetera. We want to find that place. You want to make a list of pros and cons, whatever we can do to get into that place where we rein the emotional mind in and we rein in the rational mind to find it. And so when we start to talk about what your limits are, again, like, so say maybe, you are feeling with my situation, I had made the limit that I was not going to drive my daughter to work. She was moving out of the house into an apartment, and one of our limits was that you have to find a place that was within where you could take the bus. She was taking the bus when she lived at home. And then when things started to derail, I wanted to be in the rational mind, like, well, she was supposed to do that. And this is what, the agreement was. The emotional mind, I was, pissed off. I was, mad. I knew this was going to happen when she moved out, etc. So the wise mind, prevailed when I was going to approach the limit, when I was going to head and set my limit, was that, I kind of thought about what I wanted, and I'm going to go ahead and that next slide, but my wise mind told me, like, okay, if she continues to take the bus, she's going to quit work. And so did I really want that to happen? So I had to kind of find that situation. So anything that we can do, again, to bring our own emotions down, our vulnerabilities, etc., so that we can find that place is what we want to do. So when we get into our relationship priorities, this is what we want to focus on when we are getting ready to do these, to set up this limit. And being effective in the relationship involves balancing the goals in these three areas, which are objective effectiveness, relationship effectiveness, and self-respect. We want to go ahead and think about the long term. It's respecting the other person and our relationship and respecting ourselves. We want to go ahead and balance all three, which is really hard. We don't want to go ahead and focus on the relationship so much that we end up sacrificing a lot for ourselves. And so, many of us who've been living with someone with the disorder, our sense of rights, we often really feel it's been eroded. When I went to my first, it was a support group, I said, I feel like I'm a prisoner in my own home. I was really just so burnt out by the time. And then this is before my daughter was given the diagnosis of BPD. And I found when I found family connections, this really helped me get my life back and that not to feel like such a prisoner. And so what we want to do is we want to look at the the objective is to maintain our objectives. We want our goals. We want to figure out what they are. We want to go ahead and find out what our needs are. Do we want something done? Do we want a budget? Do we want communication to go better? One of the other limits that I placed was that I don't want my daughter swearing at me. I swear. I don't care, my daughter swears. But when it starts to be directed at me, so I had to really figure out what is my objective here. I want the relationship. We want our relationship to be effective. So we want to maintain, hopefully, again, this is about having that a better relationship, a better communication with your person, no matter, again, whether you're a sibling, whether you're a romantic partner, whether you're not involved anymore and you don't love this person, but you need to communicate for other reasons. You want to act in a positive way for the overall good of the relationship. You want to model these good behaviors. You want to be validating. You want to be respectful to them. So hopefully you're role modeling that. And then we want to come away from any interaction with our people to go ahead and maintain our self-respect. How did I handle that? I lost my cool, or, we want to try and do everything we can to maintain our dignity, stick to our values, and we want to like ourselves at the end of the day. There was nothing worse. Like Donna, I lost a lot of weight when my daughter fell apart. And it was, I just really would lay in bed at night. I just didn't like how I was handling things. It's really difficult. So how can we maintain our self-respect, our relationship, and still get our objective? So to get what we want, and I know we're running a little bit late. I'm just finishing up these last 2 slides, and you're going to get more into it. So I'm only going to briefly go over this. We're going to get more into it next week, and hopefully you can come to that webinar about collaborative problem solving. So I'm going to introduce Dear Man, but we're going to go into it more. And I want to remind you that if you haven't signed up for it, even if you can't make it, go ahead and register for the webinar, because then you get a recording, even if you can't attend live. And then at the end of tonight, Tina's going to put the all of our webinars are recorded. So if you're just new to Alumni Institute and you haven't seen previous recordings, Tina, who talked at the beginning, she and I did a great validation role play. So we have siblings, we have adult children, parents, and romantic partners, etc. So we have a great one that you can just watch all the role plays about validation.
Doreen,
yep.
I have a, is it okay if we save Dear Man for next time? We're going to be covering it next month because we have a lot of questions.
Sure. Why don't we do that? So just to let you know, just to finish up on limits, this is how we set our limits. That's all. I can just say that. It's about using Dear Man. But yeah, that's a great idea. So let me go ahead and stop sharing.
Oh my gosh, that was wonderful. Take a break, take a sip of water, both of you. Good job. So Jean, should I kick this off? Unmute?
Yes, and I do want to just mention that
I just want to point out that Tina did put it in the chat, the video. So before we lose those comments, if you just click on that now, where Tina says borderline.
It's not quite in the chat for everybody, but I will put it in there. I think that's just for panelists, but I will put it in.
And also the list of validating and invalidating statements is in the chat if that's going to be exposed to other people. Yeah.
I will make sure everybody gets it. So you want me to start?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you validate a loved one when they tell you of a decision that they've made that you just know is the wrong decision and can lead to a disappointment for them? Or maybe it's even possibly a dangerous situation.
You want to take that, Donna?
Well, safety first. If it's a really dangerous situation, then I think you have to do something. And not knowing what the situation is, it's hard to say what that is. But if
they're telling her that they don't like their job and they're going to quit it.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. So that would be one where you could probably use some validation and start a discussion. So three good validations. Hey, I could tell how frustrated you are, with your work, and I'm so sorry that you're feeling that way. And is this something we can talk about? Because you probably don't want them to quit their job, because then they won't have any money, and that causes, a lot of other issues. So what I would say is just start with 3 good validations and then find a way to open up the discussion. You're doing the next module next week, Doreen?
No, Jean and Elizabeth. Jean, who was one of our presenters tonight at the beginning, who introduced herself.
So that's one, that you guys will probably cover when you get to, problem management. it's a tough one, I would say. And Doreen, chime in. I just think that if you know it's something that's real, like quitting the job and they're not going to have any money, and that's going to be a problem. You can try to address it. It doesn't mean you're going to be successful, but open up every discussion with 3 validations. And one of the things that I like to do when I have kind of a bigger problem, and in fact, one that I wrote out is one that we always used in our class, is I write it out, like, what the situation is, and I just write out and everything I want to say. And by writing it out, I can kind of make sure, like, and then I read it and read it and read it and read it. And then that way, when I'm having the discussion, I feel like I am prepared. And I encourage people to do that because, it's kind of like being back in school and studying. The more you get to know your the topic, the better prepared you're going to be. Because there's always, with somebody with BPD, there's always a wrench thrown in there, no matter what. So the more prepared you are, I think the better equipped you are to have what could be a fruitful discussion versus having it escalate and turn into a World War III. Doreen,
And that's a really good point, is that, being prepared is validating everyone whenever you can. And so, the guy at the gas station, the customer service person at Target, et cetera, whatever you can do to practice this is great. And I think as far as when you don't agree, I think, again, it's putting ourselves in that other shoe. Oh, it sounds like you're really frustrated. It sounds like you're really unhappy at work. So when they're upset and they're dysregulated, that's probably not the time to bring up that they shouldn't go ahead and quit their job. But you want to wait until, often sometimes once they feel connected to you, they may say, well, what do you think? And so we definitely want to only validate first in those situations if possible. And we have very experienced people here. If there's something I'm missing, feel free to add in, Nancy or Jean or Tina or Jill. But and next one, I know there's a short time here too.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about examples of when you can't find anything to validate? What if a person is really stuck and really can't find anything here that they can validate?
I think it's really hard not to. So say there's political differences. My son, I come from a family of police officers, and my son came home and was talking about, oh, police officers are murderers and this and that. So I went to the feelings. I wasn't focusing on what he was saying. I was able to say, sounds like you're really upset about what happened today. I know I saw the media coverage also. So you try to find something, and then eventually when he calmed down, we were able to say, I said, hey, is Uncle Jim, do you think he's a murderer? And I was able to reason a little bit, but not when he came in that door and was really upset. So if there's any way, again, we're not agreeing with them, we're looking for something the way they're feeling. Yeah, I get it. I can see from your perspective why that might happen. You really want to put yourself in their shoes versus focusing on your own values, if possible.
If I could add, there's always something to validate, even if it's just the emotion. Even saying, I can see that you're upset, or I can see that you're really disappointed this didn't work out. There's always something you can find, even even a small nugget that you can validate. Even when you think you can't, there's always something there. And validation is supposed to be about validating the emotion, because people with BPD are very emotionally sensitive. So if you can find something to validate, that will at least keep the discussion from going the wrong way, number one. And also, we'll maybe build some closeness and say, okay, you don't think I should do X, Y, Z? If you start kind of going at it like this, you're never going to get that kind of a discussion. So there's got to be something. You can always find something to validate. Even you got to stretch hard sometimes. I understand that.
And I think also that if there is a situation where you really can't find anything, you could say, you know what, I think I want to think on that for a little bit. This is where you come into that, take a breath moment, take a mindful moment. Those of you who've taken Family Connections a while ago, we didn't have this, but in the new material, we have the stop skill. Just stop, take a breath, look at, objectives, take a pause, etc. I can't remember all the STOP, but basically, just say, you know what, I think I need to think about this for a minute, and then come back.
That's a great answer. And actually, that's validating right there. you've just validated that you care enough about what they said to take some time. So here's a biggie, you guys. Can you give examples of how to validate suicidal thoughts?
I'll take that one because I deal with it. So I think, it can be really invalidating. I was invalidating in the beginning because it scared the crap out of me, and so you're like, how can you say that? I'd be so sad, et cetera, et cetera. And you try, I often say that making someone feeling better is a little bit selfish, because it's like we need them to feel better so that we'll feel better, and it's our fear, it's our anxieties that come into it. So again, if we're going to put ourselves in their certainly if there's a plan, if they're sitting there with a knife in their hand or a bottle of pills, you may need to take more drastic measures, but we're sticking to validation here. So I can't imagine. So I've learned to say, that must be such a dark place. I can't even imagine what it's like, that must be really scary to have those thoughts and feelings, and then you just sometimes have to sit, it's again doing those things. Sometimes I would cry, and because it was sad, and sometimes that helped. Actually, my daughter felt more connected when she could see that I was grieving with her. I'm not saying you fake it. I'm just saying that sometimes you want. So if they feel connected, then if you see that emotion start to come down, then you might be able to connect with the rational mind. Is there anything I can do to help you in this moment? I know you're the one that has to do the hard work, but I'm here to help you get through it. So whatever I can do. So it's really just connecting with them on that level and not trying to tell them that they shouldn't feel that way, or that, well, geez, did you call your therapist, or what are you going to do? Or, did you take your medicine, or all these other things? It's validating those feelings only.
And also sometimes we can just say, wow, as a placeholder.
Yep.
And we can ask curious questions. Can you tell me more? Or what's going on for you?
Yep.
And I know some of you need to get off, but Dawn, if you're willing, we can stay on another 5 or 10 minutes.
I'll stay on too. Yep, sure.
Actually, we do need to end right at 8:30.
sorry.
I'm sorry. I've been given full instructions. So we will squeeze in one more. Do you have one more question, Jean?
Well, no, I was actually going to do my little closing piece.
Thank you both. Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah. We want to thank Donna and Doreen for presenting today. We appreciate your time and the sharing of your knowledge with the Family Connections alumni community. And thank you to everyone for attending this program. We hope to see you soon at our future alumni events. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good afternoon.